Politics is an ugly business.
Are you open to raising taxes?
I'm against tax increases.
Do you have any plans to fix this?
Government can't really fix that.
Will you be willing to get the average people more involved in it instead of just the elites? I talk about plumbers, carpenters, small business people, farmers, ranchers.
And you've written about this before on specific issues.
Raising taxes, my friends, is not the answer.
I'm the guy that actually can walk in from day one and start making positive changes.
This isn't in the state's best interest. Certainly not in the kids' best interest.
Has he shaped the race, or has the race shaped him?
You framed it perfectly. The race is shaping him.
I'm looking forward to working with the new legislature next year.
Oklahoma has to get on track.
One of the hardest things about being a libertarian in the state has been the fact that people don't know we exist.
It is time that we walk a balance between fiscal issues and social issues.
We've kicked the reform can down the road.
We'll quit putting gas in a tank that's got holes in the bottom of it.
Seeing the train coming and not reacting to it.
A little bit about myself, I'm not a politician.
Is Lamb still kind of in the lead with followed by Cornette and Stitt?
Any of the three could wind up.
We believe we're going to win this thing. We have out-fundraised everybody. I started this race July 15th, and I'm going against the career politicians, and it just shows you that all of Oklahoma, all 77 counties, as I've been traveling, they're ready for an outsider. They're ready for a problem solver. They don't think that the guys that got us in this mess can get us out of it.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Political State. We really have three big candidates vying for, a likely runoff where two will advance to an August runoff.
Lieutenant Governor Todd Lamb, former Oklahoma City Mayor Mick Cornette, and Tulsa businessman Kevin Stitt, and that's still the case. Right now, today, if people voted, it would probably be Lamb and Cornette advancing, but Stitt still has an opening there. He's the one that's really made up the most ground.
I grew up in Norman, went to school in Stillwater. Always been an entrepreneur, always wanted to have my own business. So moved to Tulsa after college, started my company with $1,000 in a computer. Today we employ more than 1,200 people. We have offices in 41 states. That's what I've been doing.
What are these candidates aiming for, and then does it change for them?
Well, it does. It's really, really challenging to run a statewide campaign. You can't just do it all on TV or radio. You have to organize in every county. You have to have people, especially in the big counties, but even in some of the smaller ones. It doesn't do you any good if they know you if they don't get out to vote.
This is our 14th year, and so we started this with the intent of having a fundraiser. Our first year we had about 250 people showed up, and then we invited J.C. Watts.
Former congressman.
Everybody loves JC in this part of the world.
Former congressman.
Yeah. And so we sold tickets like crazy, and we had to move from the building next door that would hold the smaller crowd into here, and we had about 700 that year. And since then, we have had crowds of 650 to 750 every year, and that gets us good speakers. We've had the governor, the lieutenant governor, all of our senators as speaker, our congressman has been our speaker. So we get good speakers every year, and good speakers, good crowds, good speakers.
And that's why you need really committed volunteers, and that is just a house by house thing that people have to do at some point, is to knock on doors, give people literature. You have to do all of that stuff. As much as we want to think about Facebook and TV and all that, those components of the modern campaign, it still comes down to
shaking hands and kissing babies.
Shaking hands, people.
I've said for 14 months now that I will audit every agency in the state of Oklahoma, and I mean some with forensic audits and some with performance audits. I will audit every agency, every authority, and every trust. We will get to the bottom of what's causing our problem. We'll quit putting gas in a tank that's got holes in the bottom of it.
When I've signed that bill, it was my plan. I sat down, when I sit there and watch the A-plus plan fail, when I watched Step Up fail, and I watched where the legislature were passing raises for teachers and not funding it, and watching the crisis that we were facing, it was like seeing the train coming and not reacting to it. So the day after Step Up failed, I'm walking down the hall and I mentioned my plan to a Democrat rep. I've mentioned this plan to Republicans for over a year. The Democrat rep, they called me the next day and said, "We love your plan." They asked me if I would come and stand up with them to explain it. Now, Republicans stand up with 28 Democrats. What does that look like? It looks like leadership.
And I stated then, and I'll state again this evening, the tax increase package that supported the teacher pay raise gets an F in reform. We have done this historically in Oklahoma. Liquor by the drink, parimutuel gaming, House Bill 1017, the education lottery. We've kicked the reform can down the road.
25 years ago, Oklahoma City was a place that a lot of people didn't pay a whole lot of attention to. We probably had the worst economy in the country. We invested in ourselves, and that's what Oklahoma has to do. We have to invest in education. We have to invest in our future. We have to invest in our infrastructure. But we're going to have to invest. We can't wait for someone from the outside to come save us, because they're not going to come.
It's amazing to me that we've removed any kind of moral instruction from our schools or any other government institutions, and then we're surprised that we have a lot of crime. It is time that we walk a balance between fiscal issues and social issues. I'm one of the candidates up here that's actually talking a lot about social issues.
Politics is an ugly business, and politics in 2018 is especially so. So a reader asks that you say one nice thing about the person sitting to your right.
So, Lieutenant... Out of all the candidates, Lamb is the most connected. I mean, granted, he's not a member of the legislature right now. He doesn't have this vote, but, he's been, a part of Fallon's cabinet, not anymore. But, I mean, he's been in the Capitol. How much is he running on his experience at the Capitol, trying to run from it? What's that been like?
I think mostly he's trying to run from it, but you're absolutely right. It is in his DNA, state government. His father was a long-time state senator from Enid, Republican, back when there were hardly any Republicans in the state legislature. I remember his father when I covered the state legislature 30 years ago.
I was in Enid today, my hometown, where I was born and raised with my mom. My mom served as chairwoman of the Garfield County Republican Women's Club 7 different times throughout her public service. I got that right. I thought the Republican Women's Club of Enid, Garfield County, was a daycare, because that's where I grew up.
And so he grew up. It's part of his life, is being a Republican, an Oklahoma Republican.
To me, the answer is health and education. We have allowed our standards to slip. We have allowed our priorities to be replaced. And year after year after year, we have not had the high level of standards for health and education that we need. I intend to be the governor that 12 months a year discusses, sets the narrative, controls the tone, and talks to Oklahomans about what's truly important about being an Oklahoman. As long as we have so many people that are unhealthy, as long as we have so many people that are undereducated, we're never going to be the state that we should be.
Has he shaped the race, or has the race shaped him? Because he's, you've written about this before on specific issues, like the president. I mean, there has been some things that he is, quite frankly, flip-flopped on, essentially.
Well, I think, he was the head of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, which is, it's probably mostly Democrats, but it's a group that strives very hard to be bipartisan or even nonpartisan. They feel like city issues are not partisan issues. So he walked a line, I think, a lot as a member and a leader of the Conference of Mayors, not to sound like a Republican or a conservative Republican from Oklahoma, from a red state.
President Trump was elected last November, I guess November before last. I remember being somewhat startled and somewhat surprised. Now maybe you had every bit of the confidence that we were. I guess I fell into all the news stories about how it probably wasn't going to happen. And I was at the watch party, the Republican watch party, watching these returns come in, and Terry and I went home because we actually had to see this. We weren't able to study it because people were wanting to talk. And this seemed like a game-changing moment in American history. And the next day I woke up and put a call into the White House, or to the candidate's office, and tried to set up a meeting, and I was the first mayor that President Trump welcomed into Trump Tower.
Now he has to. He has to have an entirely different message. So he does sound a lot different when he's talking about Trump or when he's talking about guns or immigration or anything. He's going to sound a lot different than he did. To answer your question, you framed it perfectly. The race is shaping him, I think.
Surrounded by a lot of members of the community here. I'm Dave Morris from the Oklahoman, alongside Ben Felder from the Oklahoman. We're outside the south steps of the Oklahoma State Capitol. A teacher rally in progress.
You've been out here a few times since the teacher walkout started 2 weeks ago. Been walking with the teachers. What's your message to the teachers?
Well, my message to the teachers all last week and this week has been thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for standing up for schools. Thank you for standing up for the children. I really appreciate what they've done. I think the legislature has taken a good first step, but it is just that, a first step. There's more to do. I'm looking forward to working with the new legislature next year to do the job that they did not finish this week.
Would you say that criminal justice reform would be your second priority? What would be your other?
Well, in a way, after education, my next priority would be the Smart on Crime proposal of the Department of Mental Health. And if we can do that, establish drug, alcohol, and mental health treatment facilities around the state, we can have a very positive impact on prison population. We can start bringing it down.
And it is important that we weigh in and we get civically involved in order to have the best outcomes in our elections. I'm asking you for your vote for me for governor of the state of Oklahoma on June 26, 2018. At that point, we will be operating at a budget that is 15% less than what it was in 2007, with 165,000 more people. And the only way we can do that is to ensure that we have new revenue sources that can be achieved by investing in our renewable resources such as cannabis, hemp, wind, and solar.
On the Democratic side, I mean, it just really isn't much of a story right now. I mean, Edmondson is
I think, I think Edmondson's campaign was probably deliberating maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago, do we do any TV? I mean, do we spend, or do we just hoard all the cash that we've got? And they have not bought any broadcast time that I've been able to find. So I think the decision they made was, we're going to win this pretty easily, don't need to spend any money to do it. We'll just do a bunch of social media in the run up to it. And so it looks like, they're pretty confident they'll win easily over former State Senator Connie Johnson, who had almost no money.
If there was any doubt if the crowds would be less at the start of week 2 of the Oklahoma teacher walkout, that doubt has been removed.
Yeah, a crowd of similar size that we've seen every day of this walkout, which began last Monday, and they're back in full force for the start of week 2, both outside and inside the Capitol.
I talked to a lot of teachers that don't support that walkout. I don't know what will ultimately happen on that date that's circled in April. But what I support is a teacher pay raise. I support getting 65% of the appropriated education dollars inside the classroom. Education reform that I've talked about all over the campaign trail. And I support our teachers.
This isn't in the state's best interest, the strike. And certainly not in the kids' best interest.
Frustrated with how it's going right now, but I cannot support a walkout during the school year because there's a contract in place. I believe in contracts. We need to address this. They need to address this in a different type of an outcome than a walkout on their students.
Well, our teachers have done everything they could to bring attention to the plight that they're facing in education. We have a law on the books that prohibits teachers from striking. But I've looked at that statute, and it applies to teachers that are in negotiations with a school district. And they are forbidden to go on strike as a negotiating tactic with a school district. There's no prohibition against taking a leave and coming to Oklahoma City and trying to make a case to the Oklahoma legislature.
So it is time for believers in Oklahoma, the church in Oklahoma, and just decent people in Oklahoma to say enough. Now, all of the men running for Republican governor, you name them, Mick Cornett, the governor of this city, the mayor of this city, Todd Lamb, the lieutenant governor, Gary Richardson out of Tulsa, Kevin Stitt, Gary Jones, the state auditor, all of them say that they are proudly pro-life. but not a one of them will call for the abolition of abortion. Not a one of them. But let me tell you who will and who is at the top of his lungs. I am. Are you? Yes.
Are you open to raising taxes?
Well, I think you ought to put a lot of things on the table and talk about it. I don't want to mislead people into thinking that my first instinct when there's a budget issue is to raise taxes, because that's not my history. It's not what we've done in Oklahoma City. But you know, I see where they are, and I think it's a wise thing to do, to put a lot of things out there and discuss it.
I'm against tax increases. Everybody hear that? I'm against tax increases.
How's your stance on raising taxes playing in the GOP electorate?
You know, it's funny. In fact, I had a interesting conversation with Pat Campbell yesterday, and he was talking about the Republican Party platform says we don't raise taxes. There's nothing in the platform that says that. And said taxes should be used for a particular purpose. Well, what I did was far less expensive and less costly than any plan that was out there to solve a problem. And I think that's what people are looking for.
Raising taxes, my friends, is not the answer to our problem in the state. Not the answer. The answer is getting rid of foolish spending, waste, and corruption.
It's one of the hardest things about being a libertarian in the state has been the fact that people don't know we exist.
The Republican Party has done a very good job of conscripting the idea that they are small government, that they are personal liberty, that they are about freedom. But then I just have to point to 2 days ago, and I have to ask you, how does a $400 billion tax on the poor, or $400 million tax on the poor, strike you? Is that small government? Don't think so.
And what we need in Oklahoma is not a politician. We need somebody up there that's going to hold them hostage and rattle that cage. And it's going to take a business person, because Oklahoma has to get on track to sustain itself as a proper business.
So Oklahoma in general is pretty high with their teen pregnancy rates. Teen mothers generally end up in poverty for the most part, and this could lead to a lack of education for children, which could lead to crime, or it could also lead to reliance on government aid. So do you have any plans to fix this?
Well, government can't really fix that. Because you're talking about a very intimate issue, right? I mean, somebody think of a bill real quick with the first paragraph of the legislation that addresses that.
I mean, well, when I...
No, I'm getting your answer, but I just want to, sometimes we look at government for the fix and the end-all, be-all to every single issue that's out there. And government can't be a fix.
Chris, what's your sense on kind of what this horse race looks like right now? I mean, is Lamb still kind of in the lead with followed by Cornett and Stitt? Do you have any sense that there's been any kind of movement in that kind of perceived
I think it's a little bit fluid among those three. I mean, I have heard about internals in the last few weeks and the polls that the candidates do themselves, and they can change from week to week and who's in first, but and who's battling out for that second spot in the runoff, and it assuredly will be a runoff in this GOP gubernatorial primary. Any of the three could wind up. You've got all this undecided to break, and what one campaign was telling me was that, well, Lamb and of the undecideds, Lamb and Cornett have high favorables. So all the undecided will break to one or the other. But I have a hard time with that, actually. I think a lot of that undecided is going to break towards Stitt as well. Cornett has left himself a lot more open on taxes. He's a lot, and nobody really knows where he is on some of this budget stuff, and I think that's by design. I think he is purposely not saying what he would do in certain things. So I almost have a hard time believing that people could be torn, because Lamb is so clear about where he is on everything. So I have a hard time believing that I go with the clear guy or the unclear guy. I think Stitt is in the mix for a lot of people who are undecided, really. I think they'll also, but you could, easily in this race wind up with somebody, two people in the runoff with, 25% of the vote. This has been a very positive campaign so far. It's really just bio stuff. Here's how I'm trying to project myself: Secret Service agent, outsider, successful mayor. None of these guys have gone after the top three.
Yeah.
They do it, you know, they make little comments during forums and public appearances, but their references are not even by name. You know, you just kind of have to know who they're talking about when they say it.